My name is Evelyn Hart, and until a few months ago, I believed I had built the perfect life. A loyal husband, a quiet home, a peaceful future, and a luxury cabin I bought with my own money long before I ever met the man I married. That cabin was more than property to me. It was memory. It was healing. It was the one place on earth where I felt safe after losing my parents. So when my life fell apart, it didn't start with flames or screaming. It started with paperwork.
Silent. Clean.
Signed behind my back. I remember the morning I found out as clearly as the breath in my lungs. The sun was bright, my coffee was warm, and my husband, Aaron, was smiling at me across the breakfast table. I didn't know that while he asked me about my day, he had already sold the only thing that ever belonged truly to me. Not for love, not for survival, but for $60,000. $60,000. The cabin was worth more than 10 times that amount. And he knew it. When I first heard the news, I didn't believe it. It didn't feel real. My realtor called, her voice trembling with confusion, asking why I had approved the sale so far below its value. I laughed at first, a confused, nervous laugh. Then I froze. I remember walking into the living room, staring at Aaron and saying his name. He looked up at me like nothing was wrong, like we were talking about groceries. I asked him what he had done, and he said the words so calmly, so casually, I felt something inside me crack. I sold it, Evelyn. We needed the money. I'll buy you another one someday. Another one. As if the cabin was a pillow. Replaceable. Meaningless. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I just walked to the bedroom, closed the door, and sat on the floor. I could feel my heartbeat in my throat. My hands were shaking, and I pressed my palms against the carpet, trying to breathe, trying to understand who I had married. I had trusted him with everything. My heart, my home, my peace. And with one signature, he stole all of it. For the next few hours, I stayed silent.
Numb.
Empty. Until anger finally found me. Not loud anger. Cold anger. The kind that settles behind the ribs and doesn't leave. I confronted him again that evening, demanding answers, demanding honesty, demanding a reason that made sense. But his story was full of holes, and the more he talked, the more I saw the truth behind his eyes. He wasn't sorry. He wasn't scared. He wasn't even ashamed. He was only annoyed that I had found out too soon. That night, he suggested we go to dinner.
To talk calmly, he said.
I agreed, not because I wanted peace, but because I wanted clarity. I wanted to see him break. I wanted to see if there was even a trace of love left in him. We drove to our favorite restaurant, the one we used to visit on anniversaries. The one where he once held my hand across candlelight and told me he would protect me until his last breath. I stared at that same hand now, resting on the table, and I wondered how many lies it had held. The restaurant was warm, crowded, full of laughing families and clinking silverware. But at our table, there was only ice. He talked about moving forward, about forgiveness, about how I should let it go. I listened without blinking, without nodding, without breathing, because I could see something strange in his eyes that I had never noticed before. A flicker of fear. It was small, barely there, but it was real. And that fear wasn't about me. It wasn't about our marriage. It was about something else. Before I could ask him what he was hiding, before I could pull the truth out of him, the world around us shifted. It began with a shadow at our table. Two men. Dark suits. No smiles. No hesitation. They said his name. Aaron Hart. The entire restaurant went silent. My husband didn't blink. He didn't look confused. He didn't ask what was happening. He just closed his eyes slowly, as if he had been waiting for this exact moment. The taller agent pulled out a badge. Federal Bureau of Investigation. We need you to come with us. Chairs stopped moving. Glasses stopped clinking. I felt everything in my body turn cold. I looked at Aaron, searching for any explanation, any sign that this was a misunderstanding. But he wouldn't meet my eyes. Not once. Not even for a second. He just stood up, placed both hands on the table, and whispered, "Evelyn, I'm sorry." Sorry for what? For the cabin? For the betrayal? For the stranger he had been pretending not to be? As they placed handcuffs around his wrists, I felt my world tilt, slow and heavy, like a building collapsing in silence. I tried to speak, but my mouth wouldn't move. The agent looked at me for a brief moment, as if deciding whether I deserved to know more. Then he said the 8 words that changed everything I thought I knew about my life. "Ma'am, your husband is under federal investigation." My heartbeat stopped. Federal investigation? For what?
Why?
How was I involved in something I didn't even know existed? And then, like a final blow, the agent added, "It's about the cabin." The room spun. The walls blurred. And in that moment, I realized something terrifying. The cabin was never just property. And my husband was never just a liar. He was something far, far worse. I stood frozen in the middle of that restaurant, staring at the empty space where my husband had been just moments earlier. The sound of footsteps, whispers, and rattling silverware returned slowly, but it all felt distant, like I was hearing the world from underwater. My knees weakened, and I gripped the edge of the table just to stay upright. I wasn't crying. I couldn't. My body felt too numb to remember how tears worked. The waiter approached me carefully, almost afraid to get too close, and asked if I was all right. I nodded without answering, picked up my purse, and walked mechanically toward the exit. I drove home on autopilot, every red light and intersection passing like a blur. When I opened the front door to our house, the silence hit me harder than any scream could. His coat still hung by the door.
His shoes still sat on the mat.
But he was gone, and suddenly everything felt like a staged scene, a life built on lies. I walked into our bedroom, opened his closet, and stared at his neatly arranged shirts. A part of me expected to find something: cash, documents, a hidden phone, anything to explain the nightmare unfolding around me. Instead, I found emptiness. Too much emptiness. That's when I realized something chilling. Half his clothes were missing. He had packed some things before dinner. He knew the FBI was coming. My heart dropped. He didn't just betray me. He prepared for the moment he would leave me behind. I sank onto the bed, my hands trembling as I tried to piece everything together. Why the cabin? Why now? Why $60,000? I had owned that cabin long before I met him. My name, my money, my memories. Yet somehow he had used it for something that involved the FBI. My phone buzzed, snapping me back into reality. It was an unknown number. I hesitated, then answered. "Mrs. Hart," a deep voice said. "This is Special Agent Monroe. We need you to come down to our field office tonight." My throat tightened. Am I under investigation? There was a pause. "We just have questions. It's about your husband." I agreed, hung up, and sat still for a long moment. The room felt colder now, the air heavier. I changed clothes slowly, every motion stiff and mechanical, then drove to the federal building. When I stepped inside, I was led to a small interview room. 4 walls, no windows, a table, 2 chairs, and a camera in the corner. After a few minutes, Agent Monroe entered with a folder in his hand. He studied me quietly before speaking. "Mrs. Hart, we're going to be straightforward with you. Your husband has been involved in an interstate fraud operation tied to stolen assets, falsified property transfers, and illegal financial routing." I blinked, confused. What does that have to do with my cabin? Monroe slid a document across the table. This property was used as a laundering point. He sold it quickly off-market to move funds that didn't belong to him. We have reason to believe the buyer is connected to a larger criminal network. My stomach twisted. The air in my lungs suddenly felt sharp. "I didn't know anything about this," I whispered. "We believe you," Monroe replied. "But that doesn't change the fact that your name is on the original deed. That makes you relevant to the investigation. You could be in danger, Mrs. Hart. We need your cooperation." Danger. The word echoed in my head, louder than his entire explanation. Danger from who? I leaned back, feeling the weight of the room pressing down on me. "What happens now?" I asked. "For now, you go home," he said. "We'll be in touch. But Evelyn, if anyone contacts you about the cabin, anyone at all, do not engage." Call us immediately. I nodded, signed a few statements, and left. Outside, the night felt darker than usual. The city lights didn't comfort me, they only made the shadows look deeper. I drove home with my eyes constantly checking the mirror, half expecting a car to follow me. When I walked into the house, it no longer felt like a home. It felt like evidence. Every photo frame, every gift, every quiet memory now felt contaminated. I made myself tea I never drank, then sat at the dining table in silence, trying to absorb my new reality. Hours passed. Midnight crept over the walls. Exhaustion eventually pulled me into a restless sleep on the couch. I didn't know how long I was out before a sharp noise snapped me awake. 3 knocks. Slow, heavy, deliberate. My pulse spiked. I stood up, every instinct screaming at me not to open that door. But curiosity, fear, and anger pulled me forward. I approached quietly and looked through the peephole. No badge, no uniform, just a man in a dark coat, his hands in his pockets, looking directly at the door as if he could see me through it. I didn't open it. He knocked again, louder this time. "Mrs. Hart," he said through the wood, his voice calm, controlled, and terrifyingly confident. "We need to talk. It's about the cabin." My blood turned cold. How did he know my name? How did he know I was here? And why did his voice sound like a threat disguised as a conversation? I stepped back from the door, my heart pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. I remembered Agent Monroe's warning. Anyone who contacts you. Anyone at all. The man knocked a 3rd time, just once, and said, "You can't hide forever." Then silence. No footsteps. No car door. Nothing. I called the FBI immediately, but by the time agents arrived, the street was empty. No witnesses. No cameras. No trace he was ever there. That night, I realized something terrifying. The cabin wasn't just part of Aaron's crime. It was leverage. And now, I was caught in the middle of something I still didn't understand. But I would. I had to. Because whatever secret my husband buried inside that cabin didn't just destroy my marriage. It had followed me home.